Tell me, what do you know about it? Do you know about it? Do you know about it? Do you know about anything that doesn't look you straight faced in the eye? And who's making all the dollar signs? And who's making all the headlines? Who's got a way to navigate me through the left and right? Everybody knows this ain't the way it's supposed to be. Ain't the way you're supposed to be.
Mosquito Virtual Story Slam. Please welcome your hosts for the evening, Vanessa and William.
Bill Lester on piano.
Yay! Yay!
Hey!
Woo, welcome!
Welcome, everybody! Hey, I'm Vanessa
Wow!
Bartabedian.
And I'm William Mullen.
Hi, William. We are the Mosquito Story Slam, and we are really excited that you guys are able to all be here joining us today. I'm looking on the chat right now. We've got 70 people already hanging out with us, so that's really exciting.
That's great.
Yeah. So we really wish we could see you too. We can't see you right now, unfortunately, but we can see you're there. So let us know you're there. Use the chat. Yeah. William, you want to say a couple words?
We have such a great show this evening for you. I've been looking forward to this show. And especially because, this has been a pretty cold spring. In fact, it snowed this morning and it's May 9th. So hopefully this show will warm us up and we will just urge spring here.
I've got my COVID haircut. And I'm like, we're in the 80s now, just so you guys know. I just
yeah.
Back. So here we are, and I promise I won't burst into heart songs.
That's why I'm wearing a hat. COVID hair. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, no bald spots. I've covered them all up.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so guys, we just want to say that we have a really incredible lineup tonight. If you've been to our live shows, then you know that generally speaking, we have audience participants get up and tell stories from, just being a part of the live show. But we have a curated show for these virtual slams just because it's kind of an extra special circumstance, and we have a lot of really great storytellers, and it's good to have this kind of produced, which, by the way, is in partnership with Provincetown Theater, who are doing all the tech and all that promotion and show behind the scenes for us. So we really appreciate and love our partnership with Provincetown. Tom is back there. Thank you, Tom, for everything you see.
Thank you.
Due to Tom. So we're going to stick to the theme, your mother.
Your mother. Your mother.
I'm from New England, and that was, at some point it became a compliment. Your mother. So we're going to hear stories about your mother, and we have 6 guest storytellers with us tonight, actually, and we're mixing it up a little bit with a bit of a musical story this evening, and as always, my co-host and co-producer extraordinaire, William, will kick us off, show us how it's done.
So what we have done over the last few weeks, we've put a form on our website, and we've collected your prompts. So this is part of the show that people who've come to the Mosquito before are used to, who want to do a line or 2 or 3 about their story, but they don't want to actually go up in front of the microphone. We've collected them, so we'll be reading them throughout the show. And we also have a little additional thing. Vanessa, you want to speak about that?
Yeah, we thought it would be fun to just do 2 trivia questions that you guys can answer in the chat about famous mothers, about who said this, which famous mother said this. So I'm gonna do 2 of those, and you guys can type it up in the chat, and we'll see if we can keep track of who answers correctly first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, the way this works is we have a theme. Your mother. Storytellers have basically, 5 minutes-ish, give or take, to tell their story based on the theme. And I think what we should just do, William, is mention that, we're happy to be able to produce this for free at this time. But, donations are always welcome. You can find a link there. There are productions.
There's a link right there or right there? Yeah.
Right there. It's there. We got some people
Yeah,
saying
this,
hi. All right. So,
it's really, it is really important. You can just give what you can, but we have a lot of professionals with Mosquito and with Provincetown Theater that helps bring this virtual story slam to life. So it really helps offset the costs for that. So, but give what you can, and we want you to enjoy the show.
yeah, great. We're sharing everything with the theater 50-50, so it's really nice. All right, I'd like to introduce this very handsome man to my right, left. I'd like to introduce him. He is the co-host and producer of the Mosquito Story Slam, in case you weren't aware. He lives in Provincetown, Massachusetts. He's written for Jane Lynch, and he's performed on The Moth and at Ritz. And I'd like to welcome to the stage the handsome William Mullen.
Thank you, Vanessa. So my mother was a diehard animal lover, staunch animal lover. She loved animals. She over people when she was alive. She just absolutely loved them. And growing up in suburban Connecticut, she also loved TV. And if there was even a slight hint of an abuse to animals, she would yell at the TV. She'd be like, yeah, hands off. Oh, I hate people. I hate people. And if anyone wore camouflage or any kind of, or carried a gun on TV, she would go, I hate hunters. Oh, they're a hunter. I hate them. She couldn't watch MASH at all. So we grew up with 3 cats and a dog. And my mother wanted even more animals. My father didn't really allow it. But my mother even went so far to memorialize the previous dead family pets in a pewter mold laid on top of wood hanging in our kitchen wall. So my brother and I would grow up eating our meals, basically looking at a pet cemetery. We'd be like, there's Ben, there's Bo. Oh, yeah. Callie. Oh, yeah, there's Callie there. Keep forgetting about her. And, but growing up also, we didn't get a lot of magazines at my place, but I know we got one. And that was in the late 70s. It was a magazine called Defenders of Wildlife. And my mother read that thing cover to cover. And it seemed like there were 3 issues that every magazine just recycled. It was save the wolves, save the owls, and save the seal pups from getting clubbed to death for their fur. And my mom hated that. And one month, the magazine came in and she read it, and I saw her like almost shaking. And what it was an article about the new director of the Mystic Marine Life Aquarium, which was just about 15 minutes from where we lived in Connecticut. He was a new director name. His last name, I think, was Spotty or something. It was an odd last name. He was linked to having kind of relations with hunters or seal clubbers. And this made my mom so upset. And they said a protest was being planned. So that evening, over cocktails, she convinced my dad that weekend we would drive up to Mystic and partake in this protest against this new director. Now, my family was not anti-establishment. We were the opposite of it. And in fact, anyone who protests, my dad called hippies, because it was still kind of a thing in the 70s. He was just like, oh, those hippies. And my dad was the opposite of hippies. He would actually water his suburban Connecticut lawn in a blue blazer. And so my mom convinced him, and the morning that we went, she encouraged my brother and I, and we were about 8 years old at the time, to make some protest placards. And so we got some poster board out and crayons, and we wrote some nice, clever sayings on it. I was so excited because I'd seen these protesters on TV, and now I was going to be a part of it. So we rode up there and we reached the aquarium and the protesters were there. And I kid you not, it was like central casting out of the musical Hair. It was, and my father was aghast. He drives up and he's like, I'm not leaving this car. And my mother's like, no, you'd say you protest. No, I said I'd bring you. They started already arguing. My mother took my brother and I and whisked us to this, like what looked like a picket line. We were just walking around in a circle, like we were like union members or something. It was weird, really weird. And we say things like, stick at the spotty and not the seals. Stick at the spotty and not the seals. Stick at the... And my brother and I were getting a big kick out of this. My mom was all angry and she's like, yeah. And my father just stood there having a cigarette near the car or inside the car listening to some baseball game. And we did this for a couple of hours. And finally we were tired and the sun was starting to go down. So we all got in the car and we started to return to my town. And my mother found this to be she was so jazzed about this. She saw this as a teachable moment. And she leans back to my brother and I and she said, this is a very important day because animals don't have protectors. We're their protectors. And we sent a message to someone who wanted to abuse these animals. And then she muttered something about my dad not taking part. And he muttered something back. And she's like, well, it's true. I mean, you could have taken part. And then all of a sudden my mom goes, watch out for the cat. And we hear, do-do, do-do. And my mom's like, you just hit a cat. And my father's just like, no, it wasn't a cat. That was a pothole. That was a pothole. Because he knew he hit a cat. Like my brother and I turned to each other. We're like, that was a cat. And my mother starts crying and going, oh my God, stop the car. Stop the car. Will you stop the car? And he's like, no, I'm not. That was a pothole. I'm driving home. You're out of your mind. That was a pothole, Barbara. I'm driving. And my mom starts talking to the cat. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry this happened. We get home. She makes my dad drive back to the scene of the crime. And of course, he comes right back and he's just like, I didn't see any cat. There was no cat there. There was a pothole, though. There's a pothole. And I went to bed that night and I was too young to put a word to it. But I laid there going, today we saved a seal pup, but we killed a cat. There's got to be some word to describe this. And then years later, I discovered that was irony. That was irony. And the funny bit is, for years after that, whenever my father was driving, if there was an animal within 100 feet of the road, my mother would go, watch out for the pothole. Oh, there's a pothole right there. Watch out for this pothole. That's a big pothole. Thank you.
Oh, caticide.
It was, I'm telling you, and I was about a couple of weeks ago, I'm like, there's so many stories about my mother. And I was just like talking to my brother and he brought up something like he had to swerve out of the way for a deer or something the other night. And then it just triggered. I'm like, God, remember we hit that cat after a day of protesting to try to save other animals?
Is that your brother, Tim?
That's my brother, Tim. Yeah, he lives here in Massachusetts.
He's online here watching with us. He's on the chat. You guys are twins.
We're twins, yeah. Yep.
Tim.
Yeah. Timmy.
There's more stories. I know there are. That was great, William. Thank you for kicking us off.
Yeah. So do you guys want to hear your first storyteller? I bet you do. All right. So this next storyteller loves an audience and arrived in P-Town after decided to retire in P-Town after visiting her daughter here. That's amazing. And she never left. This storyteller is a poet and a collage artist as well as a storyteller. And she has works. This is impressive. She has works in the PAM 12 by 12 members exhibit. Please put your hands together for Jean Ledoux.
Well, hi, everybody. Thanks for being here today. Mothers, being a mother, quite a topic. And mothers and daughters. There's a subject for you. Lots of books have been written about that. And I was thinking about those special mother-daughter moments that women like to talk about. I grew up in rural Vermont. We didn't go have mani-pedis salon trips together. So I was trying to think about what was one of those really special mother-daughter moments. And I remember a time when my mother used to have me help her do her hair. Now, I don't know, I might be dating myself, but there used to be a thing called a Tony Permanent. Tony Home Permanent came in a box, had these little plastic curlers with teeth in them, and then 2 bottles of solution. So my mother would say, it's time to do my permanent. She would take a piece of cardboard and cut it 2 inches square, and then she would say, take my hair and put the cardboard up, and whatever sticks above the cardboard, cut it off, and do it all over my head. So that's what I would do. All over her head, to the best of my ability. Yeah, COVID hair for sure. Then you take the little foam squares and you wrap it around the hair and you roll it on the roller. And my mother's sitting there going, tighter, do it tighter. I want it really tight. So no matter how tight you get it, it's never tight enough. And those little curlers go all over her head. Every bit of hair wound around the curler, tight on her head. Next comes the lovely permanent solution. Now, if you've been near any place where they do permanents on hair, you know what that smells like. Well, this was pre that. So this was like toxic chemicals to the max. She would put a cloth over her forehead to try to keep the liquid from getting in her eyes. And then she'd have me start squirting. Meanwhile, she's covering her eyes more and more. My eyes are burning and the tears are running down my cheeks. And she's saying, squirt it over here, squirt it over here. Make sure you get it all the way down in the back. And then she'd tip her head over. And when I'm squirting it, then she'd be like, now it's going in my neck. Get it out of my neck. That's not good. Get it out of my neck. So we go through that. Then we wait. That's the next part. We wait. My mother sits there very calmly with her eyes covered. I stand there with tears pouring down my face. My eyes are burning. I'm like, Anna, mother-daughter time. So sweet. So after a while, it's time to neutralize. So you squirt on the neutralizing solution, which is a little less smelly, but not a lot. And then over to the sink you go, and you rinse, rinse, rinse. You take the little curlers out one by one. Oh, make sure you separate them. Save those plastic curlers. Save those little squares. And when she's all done and she runs the water through her hair and stands up, she looks like a slinky. Her hair looks like all little slinkies all over her head. And she shakes her head and she goes, it's perfect. It's perfect. I love the poodle cut. Mother-daughter bonding time. There's no way to describe how proud I felt at 11, 12, and 13 years old to be the one to make my mother look like a poodle. The best feeling in the world. Thank you.
I see what you're doing there, Phil. I see what you're doing there.
Yes. That is hilarious. I had visions of Mrs. Roper from Three's Company with the perm.
Oh,
Right?
yes. Yeah. There was we had a whole theme called hair for one Mosquito.
Yeah.
It was amazing. A whole theme around hair. There's a lot of people in the chat who can relate to Eugene. A lot of people. And they're like, oh, hell yeah, I remember that. Oh, no. Michael said, I made my mom give me a perm once in junior high school. So We all have those stories.
Wow.
Telling Jean, that was great.
So do we want to read a prompt or two and then we get to, I think, trivia?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. All right. Here are my prompts. I'm going to mess them up. And all right. Here we go. Something only your mother would say. Don't. Oh, I think I have to say this in an Irish accent. I'm going to try really hard.
Oh, okay, here we go.
Don't change a clout till May is out. Don't change a clout until May is out.
Very good.
Wow. And here and well, there's more. My mom immigrated to New York City from Ireland when she was 18 years old. She was the 9th child out of 9 children, all girls.
Wow.
What happened to her father? He's not in the picture after 9 girls. She lived with an aunt in Jamaica Plain, Massachusetts, and went to Mass General Hospital School of Nursing. R.I.P. Mom, 4/18/2016. Oh. Wow, that's nice.
That's nice. It's nice to remember mothers on Mother's Day. I mean, the reason we're doing that is it's
Definitely.
Mother's Day tomorrow.
Yeah.
And it's also my mama's birthday. Happy birthday, Mama.
Oh, yay.
All right, we're gonna do a little piece of trivia here. So just write your answer down in the chat, and we'll keep an eye on it. This is an easy one. Okay, let me see. You shouldn't put down a loser, Cindy, because you might be You shouldn't put down a loser, Cindy, because you might be one yourself someday. Just remember that. You shouldn't put down a loser, Cindy, because you might be one yourself someday. Just
put the answer in chat.
Okay, we'll give you the answer after the next storyteller. And speaking of which, let's bring our next storyteller to the virtual stage. Very excited. We have a first-time Mosquito storyteller with us. He is with us from New Jersey. And I know the town. You'll see it. He's from New Jersey, and he's our guest storyteller tonight. I'm sorry. I'm trying to be... Okay. This man is an actor, a writer, an improviser whose current COVID projects include 2 animated series, one with his 12-year-old son called Safety Clown, and one with his wife, actress, and singer Jennifer Miller about 2 eccentric loners living their best lives called Gold Panda Status. Ooh. Love that. Can't wait to watch that. So please welcome to the virtual stage, Ben Hersey.
Woo.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for joining us. When I think of mothers, I don't think about stories. I don't really have stories. I have these kind of snapshots, these moments, these kind of mental video clips that pop up when the subject of mothers comes up. And maybe I'm not unique in that way. Maybe we all think of our mothers in that way, in the way our relationship with them determines our relationship with everyone else in the world.
We have a frozen screen from Cedar Grove, New Jersey. There you are. You're back, Ben.
Am I back?
You're back. You're back, baby. Take it away.
Okay, so I was 12 years old and I was just starting 6th grade. Now, it had been a tumultuous time for me because just a little while before that, we had moved all the way, halfway across the country from Ann Arbor, Michigan to Vienna, Virginia, which is the suburbs of Washington, D.C. And we first moved to one side of Vienna, and I went to 5th grade there. I don't remember the name of the school. I don't even remember anything about that year. I was so fatutzt by the fact that we had been transplanted. So then the next year we moved again, and I started 6th grade at Louise Archer Elementary School. Excuse me. Now, it was 3 blocks from our house, the elementary school. Now, not surprisingly, I started to have this kind of generalized anxiety. And it started to culminate around the idea that something was going to happen to my mother. Now, it seems likely that the reason I was having those feelings about my mom was because in that same year, she was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. Now, which is what's common with that disease is that you have some symptoms and then you get diagnosed and then there's this period of remission and then it comes back sometime later and stays and gets progressively worse. So we were in this kind of period of remission when I was having these feelings. Now, I never really associated it with the disease, just kind of felt like, especially when I was at school, I didn't know where she was, what she was doing. I thought something was going to happen to her. So I started to get like tense in the morning and I would feel sick. And so she asked me about it and I told her and she said, okay, well, why don't I give you my schedule? And that way you'll know when I'm coming and going and you'll know when I'm home and you know when I'm out and when I'm going to get back. And that actually worked for maybe a week or so. The problem was, yes, I did know when she was home and that kind of brought down the temperature on the anxiety. However, on the other side, I also knew when she was going to be leaving and that she was out. And I also had this kind of ramping up anxiety when I knew it was coming time for her to leave the house. It was, so the day when everybody had one rotary dial phone hanging in their kitchen. We didn't have computers in our pockets that we could check in on whoever during the day. So that really, that as a solution started to fade away, and I started to get really ramped up at the fact when I was knowing she was going to leave in the next 20 minutes or something, to the point where one day I was sitting in the classroom just kind of zoning out everything else around me. We were doing some kind of exercise where the teacher was roaming around the room, kind of looking over people's shoulder. And I just was staring at the clock on the wall, knowing that my mom was leaving in 15 or 20 minutes. And I had this overwhelming feeling that I had to go home. So I stood up. I walked across the classroom to the door of the classroom, which usually stood open. I stood in the doorway. I turned around. I looked to see if anybody had noticed. Nobody was even paying attention. The teacher was off around the other side of the room. I took one large step back out of the room just to see if I would do it. And once I was out, I was out. And I just ran. I ran down the hall. I ran out a back door that we usually went out of for recess. I ran around to the front of the school. I passed the windows that were the office, the main office of the school, down a little embankment to the road that the school was on. Just tunnel vision, tore across the road. A car came, had to screech to a stop to avoid hitting me. My road that I lived on was kind of perpendicular. So once I crossed the road, I just tore up the road and ran the 3 blocks all the way home. When I got home, my mother was still home and she was expecting me. Apparently, the principal of our school, Miss Ramig, had heard the screech of tires, looked out the window, saw me tearing across the street, almost getting hit, and had called my mother and they had had a conversation. So she knew what was up. She didn't need an explanation. I didn't have one. I just cried. And as I was starting to calm down, there was a knock at the door. And it was Miss Ramig. She had left the school, driven to our house, the 3 blocks away, to see how I was doing. We all sat in our living room. I don't really remember much of the conversation, but the important part of it was that she said, Miss Ramig said to me, Ben, while you were at school, why don't I be your mom? And if you need anything, you just come down to the office, you we can chat, whatever you need. And even though the logic of that didn't really make sense then, because I felt like I needed to check on my mom, it somehow calmed me down. And I realized years later, it wasn't that something was going to happen to my mom. It was that something was going to happen to me. That was the reason I was so anxious. And that's the reason why it worked when Miss Ramick said, I'll be your mom at school. So she took me back to school. And I know it was working because the next thing all of a sudden I jumped to worrying about was, what are all the kids going to think that I just ran home to mommy in the middle of the day? And she said, well, just tell them you were doing something for me. Now, there's an interesting footnote to this story. When I was remembering this, I thought to myself, you know what? Louise Archer, I don't know anything about who that was and why the school was named Louise Archer Elementary. Turns out Louise Archer was an African-American woman who in 1922 became the teacher and principal of that then one-room segregated schoolhouse. She did amazing things for education and a lot of great things for that community of Vienna. One thing she was known for was leaving the school and going out to pick up kids from the neighborhood and bring them back. Thank you.
Oh, Ben Hursty, I love that.
Oh,
I love that. I can relate
that was so
to that.
great.
That's hard. I don't know.
You're a teacher, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I was just thinking that. I as a teacher, I get it because I also get that sort of childhood angst with, being a, daughter of a single mom and just moving to a new school and it all feeling so unsafe, So
Yeah.
anyway, it's really, thank you for sharing that. It's so poignant.
That was great.
God bless mothers and teachers who are mothers and people who are just mothers to people who don't have their own children.
And God bless the people who just became teachers because of COVID and learning from home. And now they realize that teachers are underpaid.
Yeah, there's that. So I want to let you guys know, storytellers, who I'm looking at right now on my screen. You guys are getting some really enthusiastic feedback on the YouTube channel. So
Great.
know that people are absolutely loving your stories. And yeah, people are just commenting all over the place. Moving story, loved that. So many exclamation points, just beautiful. Jean, people were commenting on YouTube. Love you, Jean. Great story.
Yeah.
Loving it. Thank you for all of you who are donating out there. There are people donating. That's really, really
that's great.
We're very grateful for that. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to read a couple of prompts, right?
Read a couple prompts.
Let's read a couple of prompts.
And then we'll unveil the answer to the trivia quiz.
Yes. Here we go. Okay. Here's a prompt we got. Oh, sweetheart, of course you can Zoom chat without wearing under-eye concealer. But would you want to?
That's
I could do a two on that read, but
that's things that only your mother or a drag queen would say.
Oh, correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes, I did a combo being,
Yeah.
Props, I don't know. All right, one more. Let's see. Okay. Anytime a hot dog or an ice cream cone or something would fall on the ground, my mother would say, just brush it off. You have to eat a bushel of dirt before you die, so you might as well get started. I took that out like, you're going to eat dirt because life sucks. Get started,
yeah.
Kid. Lick that dirt off that cone. Like it. That's what's coming for you. That's
so I know I try, I don't know the answers to these trivia quizzes, but That was definitely, and I don't even see the answers on chat. So that was definitely Mrs. Brady.
Mrs. Brady.
Yay!
Yes, very good. We had several right answers.
Yeah.
And I'm not even sure if I think it was Michael Gilman who got it correct first.
The
so
first. Oh, wow. Fast typer.
You win that recognition. Congratulations. We're happy to have you here with us. And thanks
for
participating on the chat.
So let's get to our next storyteller because they are so good. I'm so eager. This next storyteller, in his COVID life, is torn between creating a YouTube channel extolling the virtues of mindfulness yoga while watching Netflix, or developing an app that allows users to know the day of the week and their first name on demand. That's genius. Everyone, please put your hands together for Kevin Gallagher.
So, it was very subtle when it first started. I remember being in the car, grabbing the dashboard and making that sound, and then there was the time at the airport when I couldn't find my phone and I was in a panic. And I called my partner to tell him I couldn't find my phone. And he said, "What are you calling me on?" And I realized I have my phone in my hand. And then, of course, it's been like 20 years of having 2 or 3 pairs of glasses on my head. But, you start collecting enough of these experiences over time. And the only conclusion that I could come to was that I was becoming my mother. Now, I have to say, I love my mother dearly. She's still alive. She's in great health. She doesn't take any medication. She lives alone. Well, she lives on her own. I guess everyone lives alone now. And supports herself. But I should have been more aware that the fact that my gene pool and our personalities would merge. Because when I turned 50, I was so excited to call my mother and tell her that we are finally both in AARP together, which I found really exciting. She sort of called it kind of depressing, actually, but that's neither here nor there. So I'm a psychotherapist and I meet a lot with families. I've been doing this for about 30 years. And I've been following this multi-generational transmission process like a hawk over the years. And so sometimes when I'm sitting with a teenager and his or her parents, I'm thinking about sort of like, which one are you gonna turn out to be like? And then sometimes I'm lucky enough to see that teenager 20 years later and actually get to see whether my prediction was accurate or not. My mom is from a very large family, so if you want to think of how many siblings she might have had, you got to go above a baker's dozen. And so that means that my DNA is splayed across a rather fabulous continuum from the high-achieving, over-functioning people to the I can't get my face out of my pint of Guinness to make a plan for the rest of my life. My father's family, that's a whole other story. But suffice to say that I had 2 healthy doses of anxiety genetically given to me in life. But, I didn't really notice that happening much until I was about 40, which I call the age of departure into middle age. I've always been a good driver and responsible driver, but I started sharing my driving tips with people who weren't even looking for help with their driving. That would even include cab drivers. And so now things like watching the speedometer, using the phantom brake on the passenger side, letting people know when stop signs are coming up, grabbing the dashboard. This is just part of my daily life. I'm so fortunate, though, that my partner, Michael, I truly am blessed because he doesn't see this behavior as controlling or difficult. He calls it infinitely helpful. And those are his words, infinitely helpful. So in a sense, I think of my mom as a bit of a crystal ball. looking 20 years into the future and what are the sort of things that I might have to be up against. And I get afraid of some of those things. Like in her family, there is a word pronunciation syndrome that she and her 7 sisters have. I'll give you an example. So years ago, my mother really loved Perrier, the sparkling French water, but she couldn't say it. She would say Perrier, prairie, par. And it's like, Mom, like it's 2 syllables. Like, it's like, just learn how to say it. Like, what do you say when you go to a restaurant? And she said, I say coffee. And then there's the flat surface disorder, that any flat surface larger than 12 by 12 eventually collects a lot of paper on it. And poor Michael has been to my mother's house for more than 3 decades, and so he knows his fate is sealed. That ain't ever changing, which is sort of a little bit unfortunate. But I fear a different set of things, like what if I don't develop kind of the strength and the fortitude that my mother has to endure great stressors. Now, mind you, this is the same woman who was anxious that her hot water heater in the basement was going to malfunction, and because it was cylindrical, would become a rocket and shoot through the house and kill her in her bed at night. But this is also the same woman who proudly and bravely, has buried 7 of her siblings over the years. So I hope that I get some of the good genes, like my mother's grace, the grace to be able to absolve most grievances. Grievances are really the things that clutter up our life in a very big way. Or my mother's compassion to help people who are in trouble. She actually pulled into a McDonald's parking lot when she saw a bunch of kids teasing another kid and chased the other kids away. And she was 75 when she did that. So I think about if I end up being a reflection of all that my mother has to offer, living with the anxiety is probably an easy payoff, even if there are nail marks in the dashboard. So happy Mother's Day, Mom. I love you very much. Thank you.
Oh, that was wonderful.
I'm like crying, laughing.
That was so hilarious. The there are words and there I'm with your mother. I want to hang out with her because and so by the way, everyone, this is the secret. The piano player, he's right upstairs. He's my partner and he can attest to this. There are several words. There's probably more words than your mother mispronounces that I mispronounce. And he goes, what was that? No, what? Say it again. Say it right. Okay. And then he'll like reward me. Like he'll throw an Oreo at me or something. But yeah.
Oh my God, that's so funny. We totally have them in my family too. My family's all from the Somerville area, right? Somerville, Boston, and we grew up in Arlington. And no one pronounces their R's. So, but then there's certain words where there's no R's that they put them in.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
The shopping cart, or something like that. Like just there's no R in that word, right, Mom? So yeah, and there's more. There's so many more. Oh my God, I related to that. So that was a beautiful story, Kevin. Kevin,
that was great.
A little modest. He's also like a Moth Regional Story Slam winner, Grand Slam winner. He's told with the Mosquito before. He's fabulous. He's in Vermont.
Fabulous.
Thanks, Kev. We're so happy to have you here.
Thank you.
Most of the people we have here today have told with us in the past and just can't get here because of the dang situation. So so we're happy to see you this way. And everyone out there, we hope that everyone in your life and your family is doing well and okay. I know these are hard times.
Staying safe.
Being here. We've got a full house. If we were at the theater right now, we'd be sold out. We've got 130 people on the chat right now.
It's fantastic.
Yeah. And everyone's very enthusiastic. They're loving your stories. You've got some fans out there for sure. All right.
Should I read a prompt?
Yeah, go for it.
Let's do that. Something only your mother would say.
Mm.
My mother said to remember 3 things. Always tell the truth. Don't loan money. Never pet a stray cat. My mother also always said abracadabra when she brought food to the dinner table.
I love that. I read that. I pictured it like abracadabra. Like I made food.
Look, your mom wasn't there in the kitchen for 2 hours slaving over this for you kids. Because
probably Kentucky Fried Chicken on a plate.
Yeah, right. Well, there was one time growing up where my brother and I we were like sometimes brats, and we were like, we want McDonald's. We want McDonald's. And my mom's like, I'll give you McDonald's. And she went and she broiled 2 patties. And you ever broil meat patties? This film gets on it. It's just like film. It was the most disgusting. And she goes, that's a McDonald's hamburger. I never ate at McDonald's after that. Yeah.
All right, should I read our second trivia question?
Sure, let's do it.
Let's do that, and then we'll get to our next storyteller. Okay, so I'm going to read you guys 3 short quotes by this person, just so you get a sense of them, okay? First one is, I live for my sons. I would be lost without them. The second one, don't call me an icon. I'm just a mother trying to help. Third one, I will fight for my children on every level so they can reach their potential as human beings and their public duties. Should I read it again? I live for my sons. I'd be lost without them. Don't call me an icon. I'm just a mother trying to help. And I will fight for my children on every level so they can reach their potential as human beings and in their public duties.
Whoever it was played by Sally Field. That sounds like a Sally Field quote. All right.
No Googling out there. I'm pointing
at
my chat. Oh, no Googling. All right. Next storyteller. A very special storytelling experience right now. I'd like to introduce a musical storyteller, Peter Donnelly. He's local here to Cape Cod, Provincetown, Massachusetts. He's been writing and performing music in Provincetown and beyond for 30 years. He's the co-founder and host of the Coffee House at the Muse. You guys are local. He does this amazing open mic coffee house. It's a huge success at one of our beloved restaurants here every Monday night. And he runs the very popular Sunset Music Series at Herring Cove Beach.
And right now, I'm not seeing him.
Oh, yes, he's here. He's here.
Oh, do you see him? Okay, I'm not for some reason. All right, great.
Not too bad for you. He's here.
Oh.
And he has something else to say. He's in a musical duo also with John Richardson, which has a new recording of original music. They just recorded an album called The Gift and the Rock. So, Peter Donnelly, thank you for being here with us. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. This is so nice. What a fun show this is. This is so fun. You were all just talking about what people can't say in their people say the wrong thing in their families, and my father always used to say like, "Oh, I gotta go get my prostate checked." Anyway, my mother and father were born in 1921. So, they lived through the polio epidemic and the Great Depression, and World War II came along, and they started to have a family. And so just as my father's going off to war, they get married, and my oldest brother is born. And I'm one of 10 children. So my mother had 10 of us, and people always ask, so I'll just tell you, I'm the 8th in the order, and I am the oldest. The oldest is 21 years older than the youngest. So it took about 40 years to clear the nest in that way. And my mother always said that there were 2-year-olds. What do you call them? I've just lost it. The Terrible Twos. And the thing, that was something she really knew something about, because she had 2-year-olds all the time, because we're all about 2 years apart, give or take a year or less, or two. We were, what is that? Irish twins. So there were a lot of us, and I always remember she had a pocketbook full of Kleenex. You know, it was full, because she had all these snotty-nosed kids. Anyway, so I grew up in this town just outside of Boston. We were an Irish Catholic family, and we had, I think there were all the grandparents lived there. Generations of people of our family lived there, and there were 28 cousins on one side and 30 cousins on the other side, and it was just this huge clan. And I was telling you that the Terrible Twos. So there was always, she said, there always seemed like there was a 2-year-old in the house. So there was like, my oldest brother would be 2, and there was 1 on the way. And then there was 4, 2, and 1 on the way, and 6, 2, 1 on the way, and so forth. You know, eventually my oldest brother got married, and it was, he got married, and there was 1 in Vietnam, and 2 in high school, and 2 in grade school, or middle school, and 2 in grade school. And then there was a 2-year-old and 1 on the way. You know, it was just, there was always 1 on the way. And my mother was a real disciplinarian, as she had to be. And she could just put you in your place from across the room. But I always knew I was in trouble when I'd see her bottom teeth. She would lean in and she'd be like, "If you don't sit down right now." And so you would just like, boom, in your place, you know. And she could even just flash the teeth from across the room, like, and you would do what you needed to do. Anyway, and then there were all the saints in the house. Anything that went crash, or, you know, there was crying or yelling or fighting, you know, there was Jesus, Mary, and Joseph that would show up. And my mother was a mum, or a ma. She wasn't mother or, you know, mama. She was a real Irish mother. And she didn't just know all of us. I mean, she kind of knew all of us. I hope she knew us anyway. But she knew all of our friends. She knew who their dogs were, what the dogs' names were. She just knew everybody in the neighborhood. She was a player in the neighborhood. She wrangled that neighborhood. And when she passed away back in the 90s, all the neighborhoods we lived in, everybody showed up. It was just a line out the door and around the corner, and it went on for 2 days. And she was just a person that touched so many people. Anyway, before I do this quick song, because losing your mother, I guess, is one of those universal experiences. And so if you're a poet or a songwriter or a storyteller, you always want to grab that experience. And she obviously, when it happened, we were just all so devastated, and so I managed to get this song out of me. Before I write this song, though, before I sing the song, there was one time I was as an adult, I was over their house, and my mother was kind of stomping around, and she was seemed like she was troubled by something. So I asked what was the matter, and she said, "Well, one of your older brothers has had a vasectomy." And I thought, okay. And I didn't think, why is that a problem? And she said, and I said, well, was that something that you could do in your day? And she said, well, yes, you could get a vasectomy in our day. It just never occurred to us. It never occurred to us that you could do that. And then my father stepped in and said, well, if it had occurred to us, you wouldn't be here now. So this is called The Sure Thing. Let me get this up. There are things you'll never know. There are things that seem so pure. There are things you could live without, and there are things you know for sure. Sure as the clock upon the wall, you know you're short before you're tall. You gotta stand so you can fall. Get too big, you'll end up small. And there are times when it all makes sense. There are the facts of blood and bone. And there's a void of cold steel gray. Those are the times you stand alone, with nothing left to say. It's all lost to yesterday. And as your skin begins to fray, you just hang your head and pray. You don't want to live, so you hold your breath, but you let it go, afraid you'll die. Yeah, you want to let go, just stop and cry, but you don't, and you wonder why. She gave me love, she gave me my name. She was always there along the way. And if there's one thing I know for sure, she's part of the man I am today. Sure as the clock upon the wall, you know you're short before you're tall. You gotta stand so you can fall. Get too big, you'll end up small. Yes, there are times when it all makes sense. There are the facts of blood and bone. And there's a void of cold steel gray. And those are the times you stand alone. Thanks for having me today.
Wow, that was amazing.
Thank you.
Oh,
for downloading.
fantastic. That was fantastic, Peter. Really, really sweet. That was amazing.
So beautiful.
Really great.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. I love, like, that's just very heartfelt. Well, your story was heartfelt too. And it was amazing. What a great tribute to your mom. That's fantastic.
So I just have to ask. So it was South Boston, right?
No, we grew up in Watertown, which is
Watertown with all of my Armenian fellows.
The Armenian
yes,
capital.
Many.
Oh, all
Many
right.
friends are Armenians.
All right. Well, we were like neighbors. I was in Arlington.
Yeah.
We're in Watertown. Thank you, Peter
That's
John.
fantastic. So, Vanessa, I just wanted to remind the audience of the mission of the Mosquito Story Slam, of the Mosquito. One of our missions is providing year-round programming.
Yeah.
And we do that in conjunction with the Provincetown Theater. We had a story slam in February, in March, and COVID hit, and now we have to do it virtually. But we also offer, of course, this is going to have to be like after COVID, but we also offer storytelling classes. So we have storytelling classes that we do all around the year, in the summer, the spring, the fall. We do them in various locations, in Truro, in Provincetown, and we actually suit them. So we have a special corporate storytelling ones, and then we have a general storytelling one. So if you want to improve your storytelling skills, just follow us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram. We'll always let you know when the class is coming up. Right now, these are pretty challenging times for classes, but we're trying to work something out, especially for this summer, because a lot of people are going to be up here in the Cape. And, we may be doing some virtual classes, right?
Yeah, I mean, if people are open to it, we're down to do it. So also, guys, check out our podcast. If you put the Mosquito Story Slam in, you can basically hear every story that's ever been told at a live Mosquito. And so you can find it anywhere. It's fun. We cut out all of our annoying banter in between, and it's just stories. So you'll enjoy it, I'm sure. It's really interesting to go back and listen to these stories. Yeah. All right. We have a new website too, mosquitostory.org or themosquito.org, either one. And so just keep up to date there if you're not a Facebook. Yeah. All right. Yep. I'm going to read a couple of prompts, right?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Cool. All right. So we got so many. We can't read them all for sure, but
I know.
We each had to pick out a few that resonated with us particularly. Although this is not a good introduction for this one. When I told my mother I was a lesbian, she said, "But you're so pretty." I didn't say that.
But you're so pretty.
You're so pretty. Oh, you're gonna be a lesbian. That's funny.
Are you going to let us know what the answer is to those three quotes?
Yes. I have been following. By the way, we have a lot of people donating here, which is so exciting. And my friend John Pasquarella from Los Angeles, Johnny Boy, is in the house.
LA is in the house.
Thank you, John. And not only that, but he's the one who came up with the name The Mosquito. You know that? Yeah, sitting in my apartment in Venice, California, when there was a time.
Well, thank you. Yeah. This is great.
John Pasquarella. All right, here's another one. Anytime my siblings or I went to Dear Mom with a complaint or pain injury, standard response would be, "It's far from your ass, you'll live." And we did. It's far from your ass, you'll live. And we did. Subsequently, her mother died of colon cancer. Funny, not funny? Oh. So, yes. And, I'm just going to shout you out, Pat. Dina, she might.
Oh, that was Pat?
This is one of our storytellers who tells normally, and she
that was Pat Medina.
I know.
I think that prompt can be worked into a Debbie Downer sketch. Right? Incidentally, it was colon cancer.
Okay, so for our trivia to these questions, we have a couple of guesses for Rose Kennedy. We have Queen Elizabeth. You guys are so close. William, do you have an idea?
Okay.
It's like
so close. So it's some sort of matriarch.
Hurry up.
Jacqueline Onassis.
Oh, I think we had a Jackie. Princess Di. That was Princess
Di. Princess Di.
Yes. Princess Di. Yes.
Oh.
Make sure you rest in peace.
Yeah. Well, let's speaking of a matriarch and a princess, let's introduce our next storyteller. This next storyteller is an actor, playwright, and journalist. She appeared on Broadway in Oliver.
I've acted with women several times. She's amazing.
It's amazing. And has loved performing in many plays at the Provincetown Theater. She writes feature stories for the Provincetown Independent, which is a great newspaper. If you haven't, please subscribe. Please put your hands together for Linda Sterner.
I had two mothers, and on Mother's Day, I think about them. One mother gave birth to me and gave me away. I call her Bertha. The other mother adopted me, and I call her Mom. Mom was warm, loving, and generous, and she used to say things like, "How can you go out of the house looking like that?" I always wanted to meet my birth mother, always wanted to know who she was, who I was. I grew up never knowing who I was. Was I real? Was I fake? Was whoever? Did I exist? So it wasn't, I never did it, but it wasn't until my first son was born that it really became important. As I held Danny in my hands, I looked at him and I thought, this is the first flesh that I've ever touched that came from my flesh. So I had to search. I just had to search. And I called Mom and I said, "Mom, do you have any idea who they were, what her name was?" And she said, "Why, do you want to search?" I said, "Well, I'm thinking about it." And she said, "Well, I think her name was Barbara, Beth, Bertha." And I said, "And the last name?" She said, "I don't know, Becker, Beckerman, something like that. I can't remember. If you want to come to Florida, and we have your papers for you. They're yours." So I hung up, and of course, I instantly went online and tried to, that wasn't online then. No, I instantly went to the library and looked up all combinations of who I could be. City directories, old phone records, and I finally found a woman named Bertha Becker, my mother. But she disappeared through the years. I mean, her brother who lived with her in the time I was born was still in the phone book. So I called him and I said, "Hi, I'm Linda Sterner, and I used to work with your sister Bertha at Victor's department store in Buffalo, and I live in New York, and I'm coming to Buffalo, and I'd love to see my old friend Bertha." And he said, "Sure, here's her phone number." I hung up, and then it took me 6 weeks to call Bertha. But finally I did, and I called her, and I said, "Hi, Bertha, my name is Linda Sterner, and I was born in July 1st, 1940, blah, 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 and I think you might be my mother." Well, there was this big silence. And she said, "You called my brother." I said, "Yes, but I didn't tell him who I was or am." She said, "I knew it was my past coming back to haunt me." I said to her, "Well, I really don't want to haunt you. I just want to meet you and tell you about myself and find out about you. So how about we meet for lunch?" She said, "Okay, write me a letter, send me a picture, and I'll get back to you." So I hung up, and about a week or two later, I wrote her, and then she wrote me back, and we decided we were going to meet in Buffalo, New York at the Park Lane restaurant. And it had been an old restaurant that I used to go with my parents. It was elegant, it was Georgian style, and I thought this would be a lovely, sedate place to meet her. And I flew into Buffalo, and I rented a car, and I showed up at the Park Lane, and it wasn't there. The place had burned down. And in its place was this old Swiss chalet type building, no Georgian columns, nothing, a Swiss chalet with accordion music when I walked in. So I walked in and I looked around waiting for her, and looked and sat and looked at the people walking in and the people sitting down waiting for tables. And I didn't see anyone who looked like she was looking for someone. So I just sat there, and then all of a sudden, friends of my parents walked in. Mrs. Goldman walked in with her friend, and they were my parents' friends. And I panicked, and I ran off and hid in the coat room. And I sat in the coat room and stood there and said, "What are you doing here? Why are you hiding? This isn't, you don't have to hide. Go back out there." So I went back out there, and I sat down again. And there was this beige lady sitting across from me. She had a beige suit and beige shoes and a beige purse. And I said, "Well, my mother can't be a beige lady." And then the beige lady said to me, "Linda?" I said, "Bertha?" And she gave me this big, disgusting look, like it was really about how come we didn't know each other, but she had my picture. So Well, we went into the dining room and sat at our table. And as we passed Mrs. Goldman, she said hi. And Mrs. Goldman said hi to Bertha. And I said hi, and she said hi to me. And I was adopted in the same town I grew up in. So, and it was a small Jewish community, so everyone knew everyone else, but I was just beginning to find out how small it really was. So we sat, and the first thing she said to me was, I want you to know I had nothing to do with it. Really? My brother did all of that. He made the arrangements. So I had nothing to do with it. I said, oh, okay. We were both on our best behavior. I was being polite. You don't confront a mother you never knew. You're polite and nice. So I said, well, did you know who my father was? Which kind of insulted her. And she said, well, of course I do. He was my old husband. I said, oh, well, she said, well, we were married and we got a divorce. And then I got pregnant again. And he, meanwhile, had gotten another woman pregnant. So he married her and I was sent away. Oh, I said. And I said, well, I'd like to meet him. And she said, well, I could arrange it if you want. We're best friends. We play poker together every Saturday night. Our husbands and wives are friends. He's my best, oldest friend. I went, okay. And would you arrange it? And she did. And 4 months later, I go back to Buffalo. And I go to her house for lunch. Now, her apartment building was an apartment building I knew because a lot of my parents' friends had retired there. And I'm looking in the hallways and thinking, oh, shit, this is going to be something. But I didn't see anyone. And I walk in, and there is her husband, her current husband, and he's not there. And I said, well, she said, well, he's coming. He can chicken out sometimes, but he'll come. He'll come. And he arrived. There he was he was a house painter, and he had paint overalls on. And she yelled at him for not changing his paint pants before he came to meet his daughter. And he was one of those guys that when you're sitting in a room, all the women and men move towards him, very charismatic. And I was just charmed. And they said, well, who does she look like? And he said, I think she looks like both of us, but prettier. She weren't my daughter, I'd go for her. I smiled because you can't confront someone you don't know. And we talked on, and I met him. And then I went back to New York and my life. And Bertha died 2 years later, and I never really saw him again. But recently, I decided to do this is maybe 30, 40 years ago, but recently I decided I was going to do a DNA test because why not? Everyone else was doing it and very excited about what they found. So I did a DNA test, and it came back, and lo and behold, that man was not my father. My father was not a Jewish man named Sam, but a Sicilian man also named Sam Camerata. Now, he's dead, and all three of my fathers, my birth father, my adopted father, my fake father, they were all Sams. So here's this Sam, the birth father, from Sicily, from Buffalo, but originally family from Sicily, from a place called Valle d'Olmo. Well, I had to go. And anyway, so at this point, what I'm doing is looking up his son and working up the courage to get in touch with him, because it's never too late to know who you are. Thank you.
Woo!
Nice ending, Phil.
Yeah. Oh,
Wow.
man. That is a journey of a story. Well done,
Wow.
Linda, in telling it. I mean, there's, I can't imagine having a story that personal and that intense and being able to tell it like that. It's like you're a beautiful storyteller. And that was,
Too many Sams. You could write a book about the three Sams.
That's crazy. You could.
Yeah.
The three Sams. Oh, man. And Linda's a writer, too, Oh, Linda, wow. I do love that story. And it's interesting because I heard it one time before, many years ago. And it's evolved with this new information, which is just crazy about this new, world we live in. It's, wow.
Yeah.
I'm looking down in the corner of my screen because that's where Linda is on my computer.
Oh,
Sorry. So, thank you. No,
I was gonna say. So I just want to, we've been chugging along here, but again, thanks to our partner, Provincetown Theater, and especially thank you to our technical producer, Tom Covert, who is running this whole show right now. And without him, we would be flailing on this platform. So thank you, Tom, and thank you to the whole board of the Provincetown Theater who's embraced the virtual programming. So if you have time, you can actually go on, and they're actually running programming of theatrical performances they've done in the past. And it's great to see it on video.
Yes, yeah, we love our partnership with them. It's magical. It's been magical in their physical space and on the virtual space too.
Yeah.
So yeah, and thanks everyone who's still watching. We still have a big audience out there, so that's great.
Yay.
Gonna leave with one last prompt. If I was wearing a short skirt, she would say, "Where's the rest of that skirt?" Anyone ever say that to you, William? Where's the rest of that skirt?
Only when I did drag at my company's Halloween party, and no one recognized me, and they're like, "That's actually not allowed in the building." It was a really short skirt.
Wow.
All right.
Okay. Well, this is and yes.
Well, I was going to remind everyone also that this is being recorded, and so if you have friends or if you know someone who couldn't make it tonight for the live broadcast, they can always return and see the broadcast on YouTube. So
yeah, donations will be open until midnight, I think. So if people want to come on, just in case they didn't get a chance, no pressure. So here we go. We have another guest storyteller joining us.
For the first time.
First time Mosquito storyteller, yes. But no stranger to the storytelling world, that's for sure. So he's our featured storyteller, and he's the host of Risk and the Moth. Risk is a live storytelling event and podcast, and the Moth, we all know. And he's coming to us from Los Angeles, California, and I just was like addicted to the Moth Story Slams in LA. I was like there all the time. It's like the best scene. He's also an author. He's the author of a memoir called Bad Kid. So please welcome our final storyteller of this wonderful evening, David Crabb.
Woo.
Hi, I've been on a lot of storytelling shows now that are on Zoom, and I love that we all clap like Nancy Pelosi now. Everyone has this like small, it's like they know the clap is pointless, that no one can hear, so it's like, and I also love, I love, Vanessa, that you were saying that like you have COVID hair. For me, I'm looking like a sort of very like depressed logger in the Arctic, and you look like Jennifer Beals from Flashdance. So that's how COVID hair is working. So you're doing just fine. So tomorrow, as we all know, because that's why we're here, is Mother's Day. I love my mom very much. Her name is Jerry. She is a tiny little redhead woman from Newfoundland, Canada, who lives in a little suburb of San Antonio, Texas. I love her to death, and tomorrow for Mother's Day, I am sending her nothing. I don't want anything going to her house that has been touched by anyone else, or sneezed on by anyone else, or handled by anyone else. And my mom is totally fine with that. Now, when I tell you that my mom is a woman that lives in a suburb of San Antonio, Texas, you might think that like she's marching with an AK-47 and, you know, a Confederate flag on Austin to be like, I want to go back to the strip mall. She's not. She's very, very sensible. She's very liberal. She's so left, she almost like falls out of the car. She like is so intensely progressive. And she's always been that way. My mom, like I said, she lives in a little suburb called Schertz, Texas. She flies a huge freedom flag over the garage. She has a little plaque by the front door that sort of tells you if you voted a certain way in 2016, you shouldn't come inside. Like she's very, and what she loves more than anything else in the world is her gay son. She loves her gay son. She loves her gay son. She tells everyone at PFLAG. She tells everyone when she marches. She loves it. She makes the mom in Queer as Folk look like she's not progressive enough. Do you know what I mean? Like she doesn't. And my mom is progressive around all issues, but she's very progressive around issues of like sexuality, sexual identity. I never. She was almost like invasive. Like my mom and dad got divorced when I was 2, and my dad had a very hard time with it. Very Southern guy, didn't want to hear about it. But that was almost easier to deal with than a mother who was always desperately wanting to support and educate and know about my passions and desires. I was like, Mom, please stop. I remember when I was maybe 7 or 8, she gave me a book about sex education called The Facts of Love. And it clearly said on the cover for 12 and up. 12. And she gave it to me, and it had all those little pencil renderings that were like very delicate, like late 70s pencil drawings of reproductive organs. Like they were boys and girls' torsos that were cross sections. It was very weird. And I remember it being 7 or 8 and seeing the inside of a lady and thinking, oh my God, the head of an elk lives behind the vagina of every woman. I was so confused by the drawing. And now my mom's like, well, you knew what a uterus was. Do you know what I mean? Like she's very proud of that. She's very into, she never used like baby words for stuff. Like we would be around other adults and they would say something like ding dong. And my mother would be like penis, like very, you say the word, own it. And even in high school, I remember like there was one time when it was so intense, my mother, I had come out of the closet. She was, you know, my mom said, and I always knew because the mother knows her son. She read my journal, but she was very, very supportive. And she knew, she would ask me all the time, are you interested in a boy? Is there a boy at school? How's your friend Max? Are you hanging out? And one time when I was leaving the house, she accosted your mom is like on you, and you just would walk into another room because you know she's right behind you. Like she's just gonna fall. She followed me outside to the driveway. I'm in the car in the driver's seat starting it when some condoms just fall into my lap through the window, and I'm like, what are these? And I look, and there are so many different variants, like big ones, small ones, they're different. And I'm like, why are there so many? And I didn't pull away fast enough to hear her say through the open window, because like, it was like, leave me alone. But for all of this, it really started when I was very little. When I was a little boy, I hit that phase where little boys hit it. They get to an age where they discover their penis. You just discover it one day. It's like you're interested in trucks and the sandbox, and then all of a sudden you're like, whoa, what's that? And every little boy has it, and there's all sorts of writings, you know, Dr. Spock, there's all sorts of stuff about how to, and my mom read all of them, right? She didn't want me to feel embarrassed about it. So if she caught me sort of just, you know, absent-mindedly, the way like little boys do, like touching my penis, she wouldn't say anything. But I was obsessed with touching my penis at the grocery store. In San Antonio, there's a chain called HEB. And when we would go to HEB, she would sit me in, you know, with my little legs through the cart. And she would like park the cart and she would walk like 5 feet away to the butcher. And she'd be asking for something. And then she'd hear, Mom. And she would turn. And in one hand, I'd be holding Oreos that I grabbed, asking if we could get them. And the other hand would just be in the front of my pants, just like an oil rig, just like plunging up and down, just like holding cookies, like no connection to the two, like just like. And my mom was so afraid of shaming me about it because she was so supportive that she let it happen for a while. And finally one day, we went home and my mom sat me down and she said, baby, you know I love you and you know that there's nothing wrong with your body. I tell you that all the time. But it's not nice to play with your penis at HEB. And I said, okay. And then I just stopped. Now I should tell you that my mom trained me very well. My mom had a lot of those little precious moments figurines. You know, the little praying children with the big weepy eyes. They were all over the house. And when I started to walk, when I was very little, my mom told her friends, he's walking now. And they were like, well, Jerry, you're going to have to put away all your figurines. And she's like, no, I'm not. He's not going to touch them. And my mom still talks about the first time I was just walking around and she was reading and I went to touch a figurine on a table between us. And I did that thing where I was daring her. You know that kids do when they look at you like, I know this is wrong, but I'm going to. And right when I went to touch her, she slapped my hand. And I burst into tears, ran to my room. You would have thought that I had just been like terribly abused. The next day, my mother loves this story. I went to do the same thing, reaching for she looks at me, David, don't do. And right when I was about to touch it, with my own free hand, I slapped whacked myself, burst into tears, and ran to my bedroom. Like she was whoosh, like home training, like my mom. So it wasn't surprising to my mother that when we went back to HEB for weeks, no touching. Like I knew, don't do it there. And then one day we're in the checkout line at HEB. All has been quiet on the Western Front. I've not been touching myself. It's very good. And there's an elderly lady in front of us. And I'm standing behind the lady, kind of my head is even with her butt. And the lady reaches down and she just kind of itches her groin area, like near her belt line, this woman. And before my mom can stop me, I reach up and I pull on the lady's sleeve, and then she turns to me and she said what everyone said to me, because my mom styled my hair like Patty Duke, even though I was a boy. She said, "You're a beautiful little girl." And then before my mom could stop me, I just said, "Hey, lady, it's not nice to play with your penis at HEB." My mother was mortified. She drove me home. We had to have a whole other talk that probably is the seed that planted, like, I need to give him that Facts of Love book for 12-year-olds now, because there's too much to explore. My mom has been extremely supportive of who I am ever since then. She loves me. She loves my husband. She loves the dogs we've had. She goes to PFLAG. She does all the marches. She's great. And sometimes I think back about that way that I felt when I was young. And I have to tell you that I was wrong, because I would take a mom that is overly supportive over a dad that doesn't want to hear about it any day of the week. So my mom, I think you're watching now. Happy Mother's Day. I love you.
Oh my God.
Oh, that was amazing. That was awesome.
I am crying. That is amazing.
Amazing. Don't touch your penis. And it would have been hilarious if she was packing, if that woman was packing.
All right. Okay. But David, you do need to come to Provincetown. Let's just
yes.
David has to say.
It's going to happen when all this is over. I need to do it. Yeah.
My good friend Michael, his drag queen name is Precious Moments, actually.
Is his routine a little like biblical and Jesus-y, or no?
It's phenomenal. You guys are definitely going to relate.
That's so great.
Wow.
Well, listen, thank you so much for all of our storytellers. Please, at home, put your hands together. We had Jeannie Ledoux, we had Ben Hersey, we had Kevin Gallagher, we had Peter Donnelly, we had Linda Sternham, we had David Crabb, we had Phil on piano.
And yes, and Tom is bringing everyone to the virtual stage right now. People can see everybody, so wave to your audience, storytellers. They can all see you. They're loving you. They're just like absolutely
And storytellers, and we would not be here tonight without the creation of the Mosquito by Vanessa Bardini. Put your hands together for her. The creator of this wonderful show.
Partner Caitlin Langstaff too. We created this together. So thanks. Inspired by what are you gonna do? You know, it's all good. So yeah, thank you everybody. If you donated, thank you. If you just showed up, thank you so much. We need you, and we love you, and we'll have another show in June. We're gonna do something around Pride, so stay tuned.
Pride.
Thank you to all our storytellers. You guys are just amazing.
Thank you. Hugs.
Tell you. Stay safe, everybody, and we do love you.
Bye-bye.
Bill Fletcher. Captain in Vermont. Stay well. Los Angeles, Jersey, Palm Springs. On the screen. Got a lot of bottles.